We can talk catch and shoot at speed, working on some different stuff, some footwork stuff. We can get in the gym this summer.
I just need a heat assistant to like leave the organization. I can hire him just to put me on a scale every day. Just like, buddy.
Is it really that militaristic?
No, I think some of it's like.
When was the last time you were on a scale?
Well, that was 2 days ago.
I could ask a direct question.
Good stuff.
Welcome back in to the young man and the three. We got a special cohort here. We got Ryen Russillo, Dan, Big Cat, and of course, Tommy Alter checking in from Chicago.
This is a loaded,
Kidnapped us.
loaded crew.
He kidnapped us.
Yeah, we're
He took us out to dinner and he's like, hey, can you just drop us off at the Four Seasons real quick? He's like, hey, can you come up here real quick?
What's funny about that backstory is actually I was having dinner with Russillo. We were having dinner tonight. He was like, I'm not coming. He shows up to dinner. Then we are like, we're going to meet you at the hotel. He's like, oh, what are you guys going to go do? A podcast?
No, you asked me to come on a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we're going to go do it. He's
Guy
like, okay,
can't
I'll
get
come
enough
drop
of the
you
podcast.
off.
Put
We
a
get
mic
out of
in
the
front of
car to
me.
drop off. He's like, hey, I'll just come up for a little bit.
I don't get to see Russillo.
I knew what was happening the whole time.
Yeah.
I think
Tommy
we all did.
also has learned the tricks to like, because I say no to basically everything. Tommy just constantly updates me, so I'm like, I'm probably not going to make it tonight. And he's like, "Hey, we just got to the restaurant. Hey, we're just sitting down." Like keeping me updated, so I have to reply. And then I'm like, "Fuck it, I'll go." Tommy's
a very lucky dude. How much we like him.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's true.
And I do like.
It's true.
Duncan too,
You guys
but
do.
that.
You guys do show up probably more than you should. I would say.
that's
Now that
huge.
we're here,
That's
he's
huge.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
you say that to everyone.
I've seen him. I've seen him every time I come to Chicago, which is crazy.
Yeah, because you do that. You beat
But I
me
also
down.
go to the office too.
Yeah,
that's the
that's
other
I
thing.
flew here, so I need to know what your expense account situation is.
I mean,
with-
talk to Richie.
with young man.
Talk to.
Yeah,
talk
that's
to, this is on
it's
the
not
heat.
part of my responsibilities here. The low budget studio here though, just sequestered in a hotel room. But I appreciate you guys making the effort.
Is that your first time in a cuck chair in a hotel room?
Don't
Probably-
answer,
Don't
Probably not.
have a great view.
don't answer that.
Man, I have a story, but I don't know.
Let's get
It
it.
does have to do with basketball.
Is this the right audience?
Yeah, I'll share as much of it as I can. And maybe you'll believe me, maybe you won't. But I used to go to the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament all the time,
Yeah.
and I would.
I didn't get invited to that. Fun fact.
Well,
I
that's
was just
not a
seeing
bad
it.
thing, to be honest with you. And if you don't know what that is, that's like the OG pre-draft camp. But the thing is like no one, like people think people don't play in the combine. Like nobody showed up to Portsmouth, but all the front office people would show up to Portsmouth. And so I remember, I think Chad Ford early back in the day was like, if you want to get in and make contacts and meet people, go to Portsmouth because you go to this high school gym and everybody's just right there. And you kind of just go up to dudes and be like, hi. And, like people can tell you pretty quickly, like beat it. Like you'd always looked at the Miami Heat crew. They were always super buttoned up. And like you would go up and be like, hi, I'm Ryen. I'm from Boston. Like, who are you guys drafting? Like no tact, like nothing. But some guys were great. Some guys were like willing to entertain you. And there's guys that I've talked to now for like 20 plus years that I've met, some of those earlier Portsmouth ones. So we ended up hooking up with this crew of dudes that were like, hey, we're going to this party. And I'm like still, I think in my 20s. So I was like, all right, I'm game. And we end up in like Virginia Beach. It's some weird like hotel. And it's like a black fraternity party. And it's me and like one other white guy. And nobody can figure out, wow, we're like, what are you guys doing here? And the place is like going off. It was a great party. And like I was hanging out in like the hotel lobby bar, and these dudes were like, oh, we're gonna go up and like party in this room. And I'm like, what? All right, like, yeah, it makes sense. Like this place is raging. And some guys like knew the guy I was with. They were like, oh, you guys are NBA like dudes, and the whole thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm an NBA dude. And
What year is this?
This is like it's over 20 years ago. And so we go up to this room and like this huge dude answers the door and is like, come on in. And I'm like, all right. Like, and it's like weird. It's almost like Michael Scott if it went off at the paper convention.
Yeah.
And so me and the guy that brought me to this thing like sits down in another chair, and I'm in a chair just like this, and there's a dude laying on the bed, and then there's like 7 other dudes, and I'm like, are there any beers? What's going on?
Maybe some music.
Were you vibing with them?
Everybody was really cool. Everybody was really friendly. And then a woman showed up, and she sat down on the bed, and she looked at me and the other dude I was with, and she's like, who the fuck are they? I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And she's like, those dudes got to pay extra.
Oh,
and I'm like, and then the guy came up to me, he's like, I'm going to need some money from you guys. And I was like, can we just leave instead? And yeah, that's the last time I think I've sat in a chair facing a bed this way. Who knows?
Story.
Who knows what?
That's the best part about Russillo. You just give him one prompt. It's like, well, I do have a story.
It's hoops related.
Yeah.
Are you still in touch
tied
with the
in.
other guys?
No, there weren't like long-term friendships.
So no like
Formed
golf
out of
trips
that.
out of that or anything?
No. But I'll never forget like sitting there going, this is the start of like a Dateline show.
Yeah.
Like, and then he went upstairs with some people that he had just met.
This is the
Yeah.
You
start.
got to just change the end of the story. Just be like, and that's how I met my first wife.
Yeah. She's super friendly.
How was the talent at that Portsmouth Invitational?
It wasn't great. I mean, the great thing about the Portsmouth thing, the structure of it, I don't know if it's like this is now, but apparently it was like all the local businesses that sponsored the team. So it'd be
Yeah.
like Ray's lawn care,
Yep.
and then Jim's Shipyard or whatever. So that's what the names of the teams were. And
That's awesome.
apparently what they would do the week leading up to the games actually being played is they'd all get together at this country club, and they'd all just have this night where they got after it. And then the guys would draft the teams. Okay.
That's great.
And then
It's
they
like
would
Little League.
right.
Yeah.
They'd submit the rosters to the NBA, and then the NBA like staff would be like, dude, this asshole has 4 centers. Like you can't have, like, they'd have to shuffle them after they had their little draft. And then, you never know. But like, you watch Chris Lofton out there and you go, oh, like if he can't separate in Portsmouth, maybe he's not going to separate the way he did in college and the pros. So every now and then, you never know.
Yeah.
The evaluation never stops. I remember Travis Diener was there, and there was a couple like old school Black Scouts, and I just die and laugh, and they'd be like, look at Eminem. Look at Eminem go. And they just called him Eminem
Oh.
every time.
How pissed were you didn't get invited?
I wasn't surprised. I mean, it's for seniors usually.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
pretty
the
sure
thing.
it's just
It's-
seniors. Yeah. So I finished up, and I remember Coach Beeline calling me into my office, or calling me into his office, and I was asking about Portsmouth. I was like, look, I'd love to play, just something where I can get evaluated in a setting that's not Michigan. And he's like, yeah, they got you as an alternate to the alternate right now. So you're going to be down the pecking order a little bit. But people turn down Portsmouth all the time, especially now, with agents are like, we don't want you going to play there. So I thought there was a chance I could still get a nod, but didn't end up happening.
The funniest part about it would be like there'd be a 7-footer. I forget who. I'm not going to say, because I mean it was. There were very few guys that would even be drafted. Like even at the combine, the guys that are playing in the combine, like it's loaded with second rounders. There's very few first, but there'll still be a first. A few, like when Christian Brown was running around like dunking on people in combine games. You're like, okay, you actually can make a little bit of a name for yourself if you want to step up and play and your athleticism shows off. But in this game, those Portsmouth games, man, there'd be like some 7-footer who didn't take a 3 all season long, and he would just decide like, I'm going to show these people my perimeter skills.
Range, yeah.
And it was a free for all, dude. 7-footer rebound, no outlet, dribble it up, pull up, NBA 3, clank, but he'd look at like scouts being like, I have that in my game.
Yeah. It's part of my bag. Big weekend for Dan.
Yeah.
Guy had a
Big weekend.
Florida.
Fantastic come
Yeah,
up.
Florida.
I was living vicariously. I've actually been living vicariously through a lot of your bets recently. I texted you a couple weeks back when you were just on that absolute
16-0
heater. Just fun to be a part of. Just
I'll
from
never
the
be back
sidelines.
there.
He looks different after it.
There was an 8-day stretch where I was making QB1 money on my bets, like the 16-0 bets. Like I did the math and I was like, I just made QB1 money.
At
for
any
8
point,
days.
are you like removing that from the account, or are you just rolling it
No.
out? You're just
It was just a cushion that I ended up losing.
Just staying on the roller coaster.
That's the thing is, when I post like a Florida bet slip, people, and I won a lot of money, and people are like, show the losers. It's like, dude, I'm a loser. Like I never said
that's
anything
ridiculous.
else.
I mean, people hate positivity so much.
It's like this is gonna maybe we'll get to the second round of the NBA.
You went
playoffs.
16-0 on released picks, and people found a way to have a problem with it.
Yeah, I had
Yeah,
people saying that
that's
I was copying tout services. I was like, "What are you talking about? I
Me?
took all overs. What are you talking
By the
about?"
way, these mysterious tout services, I'd love to know more about it.
Yeah.
But, if it was that easy to access, or that accessible, I should say.
Did you have a point last night where you're like, I'm 100% fucked?
Yeah, Houston being up 10 feels like it's
No,
20.
Yeah.
And it's
The way
and
they
like
play,
Clayton couldn't the first 3 shots that Clayton took were so bad. And like I do think the balls are overinflated. You didn't have to play with those balls, but they are overinflated.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of content circulating about that.
Yeah, and you can tell almost instantly, like when
They're
a guy
like firing
just
off the rim.
and then like the dribble will be like up at his
Yeah.
shoulders, and you're like, this is not normal. So I was like, this might be a problem because
You don't like a tight ball?
I like that, especially against Houston. That's like that's how they shoot normally.
Yeah.
So
Just throw it up and go get it.
but it was a
Volleyball
good
in the
Final Four.
backcourt.
I'm happy the Final Four delivered because everyone was down on the tournament. I still love college basketball. Not a lot of us left.
I loved it this year.
Yeah,
I got really into it.
yeah.
I think
So,
it's an overreaction to say that the Cinderella stuff is
I agree.
just
I mean,
done.
you saw too last night. There were no 5 stars and no freshmen playing. So, like, you can't. I mean, if Duke obviously had beaten Houston, then it would have been a different story. But like, you can't load the roster like everyone thinks it
Right.
is with NIL, where it's like, oh, we'll throw 20 million and just have the 4 best recruits and we'll win the title.
Well, that's what I mean. Coaches have come out and said, like Patino came out and said that we're not doing freshmen. Like,
Yeah.
we're just going to go get guys in the portal.
Right.
So I mean, it's always been hard to win with freshmen, but now it's probably just getting even more challenging because more guys are coming back.
Yeah. How many times would you have hit the portal? I mean, the NIL money.
Well, I
would've
hit it
been nice.
once as is.
Right,
Probably
but then-
wasn't getting much of a payday coming from Williams. Maybe
Right. But after that, you would have been a right portal guy.
after that, because my best year at Michigan personally was actually my first. So I would have been in the portal for sure after
Instantly.
that one.
Yeah. Oh,
But yeah, I mean, people tell me now, like, you average like 10 points, you're looking at
yeah.
500, 700K or something like that.
It's
Maybe,
also-
maybe more.
It's also gotten so crazy. Like, I wish they would just announce when guys stay. Don't even tell me when they're in the portal.
Right.
Because it's like, I just want to know when they're
Everyone's a free
staying.
agent every year.
Yeah, right.
100%. Yeah.
Just tell me when they're staying.
Do you think I was at dinner with some people last night and they were saying that college coaches are going to be just completely different? Like they're going to be more like NBA coaches moving forward. Like you're going to lose all the hard asses because it's more about managing ego and money than it is like I'm instilling my will on you.
I will say it, tying into that point, I wanted Houston to win. I'm sorry to say that.
No, that's fine.
Because, I mean, Calvin Sampson's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
but
his
he's like the
approach-
last, but like there's the OGs.
But Patino
Yeah,
had a hell of a year.
But they're those guys, but once those guys are done, so it might not be next year, but once those guys are done in 5 years, 10 years, whatever
Yeah.
it may be, the next generation
I don't
is
know.
going to be built
I mean,
different.
the counterpoint I would say to that is the guy who just won back-to-back national titles is pretty big hard ass. Dan Hurley is
Yeah, that's fair.
is
And he's not that old.
Yeah, he's not. That's why I always like people say that I'm like, too defensive of Dan Hurley or slurping him. It's like, you guys gotta understand college basketball, like the coaches matter so much because the players change so much. Like when you think of college basketball, when it's, the Big East days, when it's all those characters, when it's like Boeheim and Coach K and Izzo, if we lose the hard asses, like it's gonna suck. So Dan Hurley is like I like cherish him. He's a psycho.
People reading his lips and
Yeah.
mic'd up. And
Yeah, he's
I
a
actually,
psycho.
I spent a little bit of time on their campus this past summer. I'd never met him in person, and I was just passing through stores and got a workout in their facility and spent maybe like 20 minutes talking with him. And he's everything in person that
Yeah.
you would. I mean, he's like wired and
Yeah.
dialed.
He
Like
drinks piss before every game.
I don't think the LA thing would have worked out though.
that would have been fun to see. To be honest, I mean, I don't know exactly how that shakes out. I mean, I think going from college to and having that control that he's always had to the NBA is just a
Right.
challenge in and of
Right.
itself.
Yeah, I think the relationship has an expiration date in the NBA that just gets sped up with that kind of personality.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really interesting thought, Tommy, on like, will the personalities of these guys have to change? I mean, the structure of the teams are changing. I mean, they're hiring GMs left and right, which makes sense because you got to stay on top of this when there's 2,000 kids or just under 2,000 kids transferring in D1. But I always feel like in sports, and if we keep it just to college, like we constantly think we're at this crossroad
Mhm.
that is always going to define like what the future is. And usually we're basing this like crossroad question on whatever the most recent result is. Like we heard it in the SEC with football constantly this year. You know, they don't win national championships for the first time. Big Ten wins back-to-back titles with 2 different programs. It's like, okay, maybe there's this huge shift. And look, maybe this shift is happening. But when you have something that happens, there always has to be like maybe a more profound reason than what actually is just the randomness of sports. Because the NIL, it's like, oh, the NIL and the portal now, like the SEC can't stack. So I'm like, okay, but what you're saying now is that you think moving forward, like the SEC will not have a run again. I'm like, I still find that kind of hard to believe when you think of the geography and all the recruiting. So like, if you look at what's happening in college basketball and it's like, oh, well, this is all different. It's like, okay, but who do you think are going to win these titles?
Right.
Like, do you think you're going to have all sorts of results now that don't necessarily make any sense? And another part of the portal thing that kind of drives me crazy is like every story is kind of told as some horror story. Like a portal kid's like a bad kid.
Right.
Like he doesn't understand it. And we did the same thing in college football with the 2 quarterbacks. It's like, oh, you don't want to compete? It's like, dude, I was a top 50 recruit. You brought in a top 20 after me. He's better than me. I want to play in the NFL. I'm never going to take a fucking snap here unless I'm a graduate student who redshirts his junior year. Like, I'd like to play. And I think we've all accepted that, where we used to like applaud the guy who was like, he stuck it out for 4 years, never took a rep in practice, never played.
Hard
and
coaching,
here he is. It's like, he really responded to this. And like, I think that guy was always kind of glorified, where I think the reality is now, like, you really want a guy to sit around and wait 4 years, and that makes him out to be a better dude. So I think the portal part of it is just a reality. And ultimately, like, we'll just, I mean, there's older guys listening to this that I think would agree that like they probably were against players being paid. And now that it's just normal, they're like, there's probably a lot of people going, I can't believe I was so against something that actually was incredibly exploitive.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think about, like, it just was such a no duh they should be paid. When the March Madness is happening and they're showing the ratings and it's like, you know, historic March Madness, and
you couldn't have the programs continue to be like, hey, Clemson, we got a new indoor pool, and you're like, well,
I did see this. Did you see the slide at Clemson?
Slide,
the slide
and
they
like,
put in like 6 years ago.
You could see what was
sick.
happening with these facilities. I visit these programs, like, oh, we're actually, what's that over there? Oh, we're breaking ground on our new practice, our new turf field. I'm like, how old is this one? 7 years old.
We can't pay you, but we have a nap pod.
But all we're doing is spending all the money to be able to say that we can't. Like, I had Billis on last week, and we got into this deep dive of like all the portal stuff, and I was even, when I was younger, I was like, well, it makes sense you should have to sit out a year because then you're just going to have to re-recruit your kids. I believed that at some point.
Yeah.
And Billis brings up the point. He goes, you know that the only sit-out rule that they had for transfers was college football, college hoops, college baseball, and like hockey. And then so like if you were a gymnast, you didn't have to sit out.
Right.
And then you go, oh, wait, I wonder why that is.
Right.
It's like, this is the one that we're making all this money on. So we're going to have these rules. Like, there were basketball coaches that Billis said that didn't know that all of these other sports didn't even have a year that you had to burn. You had to burn a year of your eligibility. To think about. And we were all okay with it. And the fact is they were only doing it. It's the same, like, there's stuff with like hockey or no, excuse me, baseball could have an advisor, but if you had lunch with an agent and played football or basketball, you're ineligible.
Yeah.
So look, I'll never have any sympathy, even if I don't want college sports to be destroyed. There's just too many things over the years. You're like, I can't believe people actually defended some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So then how far does this get pushed? Because I mean, I'm sorry, I sat out, which still makes no sense to me. I was going from Division 3 to Division 1. It's like, I'm not like I'm
Was your coach upset
when I left?
Yeah.
No, because he left. He took another job.
But I mean, like the fact that you could go from Williams to Michigan, imagine somebody going like, you signed up for
backstabber. How could you do this to us?
But like, how far does this get pushed? Because we've already seen the NIL, the collectives, they've gone from $2 million for a team. Teams are saying we're going to commit 12 for next year. Like, how far does this? Are we talking like multi-year deals? Like,
the multi-year deals would be interesting. I think that the beginning of NIL, everyone spent their money, and then eventually it's going to be like, rich people aren't going to just be giving money to 18-year-olds hoping they're good forever.
Yeah, they're not going to get a return on this.
I was going to ask you guys about this.
And now that I think the rules coming up, they're going to rule on it now, where it's like each school has whatever $20 million to pay themselves, to pay their
revenue
players.
share.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think that's like, you go to a rich guy and it's like, but don't you have $20 million to pay? I think it will normalize a little bit more.
Yeah.
I say that too. If I ever like had $1 billion, I would just would just give like $500 million to Wisconsin. Be like, give me
500
one
million seems
title.
high.
But wouldn't you
One
be?
title
But to that
after
point,
taxes.
my question is the ROI with this stuff. Because say play that out, not that unrealistic. You make $1 billion. You decide I'm giving $200 million to Wisconsin. You're gonna be fucking pissed when Wisconsin loses in the round of 32.
Yeah, we'll see how
You're gonna be
long
like,
Larry Ellison, keeps giving money.
100%.
That was the Larry Ellison Michigan thing. Dave Portnoy's obviously I love him. He's probably one of the closest people outside of my family, but he's the luckiest man alive to have Larry Ellison, and then he gets all the credit for the quarterback. It was insane.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck, why can't I have a Larry Ellison? This is bullshit.
When they were first getting involved in the collective, there was a dinner down. He lived somewhere near like Palm Beach.
Yeah.
And of course they like send out all the invites, Jeter, Brady. Somehow I got caught up on the invite list, and I'm sure it's because Jeter, Brady. It's like, all right, you want Tom Brady, you want Derek Jeter, you get Duncan Robinson. But I ended up not being able to go. But just in that dinner alone, I think they raised over $10 million just a snap of fingers. It's
crazy.
But I think to your point, at some point, people are going to be looking at, all right, well, what's the return on this? And I guess if you have a revenue sharing model, there is an access point to becoming the cheapest way to own a relevant team. If you're somebody that's investing your own dollars and potentially getting money in return. I don't know what that looks like.
Well, I don't know that there's supposed to be any return. I mean, that's kind of the concept.
Yeah.
And I kind of like understood what Tommy, like when I was hearing about some of the first numbers, I'm like, oh, this is going to be free for all. There's going to be people that have money or teams that have never done anything. And then there's going to be like this flattening out of like, oh, so the same teams are still winning. It's like, what am I doing? And I thought there might be some kind of correction. But I mean, the cap thing sounds a lot like when you get a credit card and you're a freshman. Like I remember applying for the American Express card when I was a freshman in Vermont. And I was like, this is going to be sick. $500 credit limit, $500 credit limit, by the way. And, they gave you 2 tickets domestically anywhere you wanted to go round trip. And the funny thing is I couldn't even afford $500 credit limit. So it's like, where am I actually going to go with these ticket vouchers? Because I can't afford hotel or food once I get to this place. And the whole point of it was like, they just wanted you to sign up for the card. Yeah. And they were giving you the credit limit was $500.
Yeah.
But it was smart in the way of like, we know you guys are all going to fuck this up, but we'll only let you fuck it up a little bit. And whenever I think about like the salary cap or whatever this new thing is like, you have to protect people from themselves.
Right.
And I think the schools will probably feel like some of these people who have donated have gotten burned. Because I mean, everybody's thinking like, oh, we're just going to load up all this money and now we're going to play for a national championship. You're like, yeah, except everybody else that was already beating you is going to do the same thing. And if they come up with a cap, then the schools that have always found ways to get the recruits before any of this stuff was like supposedly out in the open are just going to find ways to go circumvent it again.
I also think there's going to be like to Ryan's point where like it gets crazy and then it kind of we all overreact like this is the depth of college sports. I like think like in baseball or what's happening in analytics in basketball, like there'll be a Moneyball correction where guys are, hey, instead of getting the top 3 guys in the portal every year for $10 million, you can find a John Tonje who's like, he was the 200th portal guy and he was incredible this year. Like basketball is a sport, especially where it's like the pieces have to fit. You can't just go and spend the money and just hope it works.
That's
what the Suns are happening.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. I mean, the AJ Storr who went to Kansas, I think he's back in the transfer portal. He was St. John's guy, Wisconsin, then Kansas. I think he got like $1 million to go to Kansas and it didn't work out. And now he's back in the portal. And it's like, I was bummed that he left Wisconsin, but it's like, you can't just be like $1 million means you're going to win a title.
This is slightly hypothetical. You are kind of living this over the last couple of years because this has now been going on for a little bit. But with the younger guys coming into the league who've gone through this and their approach, obviously everybody individually is different. So you're not like painting people with a broad brush. When you think about yourself, you think about a lot of the sort of better young players in the league. We did an ep last week with J-Dub and Caruso in OKC. They're both examples of this in their own way. They had no hype in college. Nobody was paying either of those guys NIL money. Like J-Dub was at Santa Clara. He was a first round pick, but he wasn't exactly a guy that was going to be like and it put a chip on his shoulder and it put like a battery in his back. And like he turned into this guy. He'd be the first one to say it because of that. Do you feel like if there are kids in college who are like making $6 million a year, transferring 5 times, telling everybody they have 9 agents, they have all kinds of things, that actually is going to affect them when they get to a place where like everyone in the league is a killer.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what I would have been in college if I had, you know, $1 million in my bank account, like what my decision making looks like. You know what I mean? Like, you know, for myself, even if I could have been because I did spend 5 years in college. If I could have played 4 or 5 years in college and made whatever $500K to $1 million a year for those, like, I probably would have looked at that as a win and taken my ball and gone home in some respects. Not saying that I wouldn't have continue to work out and all that stuff, but it definitely impacts you. I mean, you can't say that it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think one thing you'll see is like older guys now in the draft will probably get taken more because younger guys are just going to keep going back to college.
Right.
If they're not going to be a first round pick, it's like, you know, why would I go be a two-way and play 45 games in the G League and make less than what I would be making if I just stuck around and played in front of packed, you know,
yeah, I mean,
arenas.
it's already happened in the WNBA, which actually makes a lot of sense, which
Right.
I think leads to like why a lot of WNBA players are like, hey, we're not treated fairly. And I'm like, look, I totally get it. It's like, it's been explained to me, like their life was far more catered to when they were at a top women's college program than when they get to the WNBA. And it just doesn't make any sense. You're thinking like, I'm a pro, it's part of the NBA brand. And like, it was better when I was in college. The NBA doesn't have that issue, I don't think. But I think there's also something you were talking about later, like Jalen Williams. Like, does Jalen Williams become Jalen Williams if he's catered to immediately, if he's already get a bunch of money? Like, maybe he doesn't, but that's going to happen. There's going to be a ton of that. I hate the word narrative, but like people who hate what's happening now in college sports, which I understand, are going to use the failures as the only examples of why this is bad. And it's the same shit used to happen with guys. When a guy in the 80s would want to leave like school after his junior year, it's like, oh my God, you know? And then it obviously evolves into sophomores. And I remember Garnett coming out of high school. It's the mid 90s. It's like nobody's done this in a really long time. Who does he think he is? I remember like a prominent voice in sports, I've told the story before, but was arguing on the air, maybe he should only play home games. And Garnett can't play road games because he's so, no, this is like a real guy had said this. Mad Dog
what was
said,
a lot like to
Mad
create
Dog's-
some stability for
when
him?
Mike and the Mad Dog were on in New York,
I
it was
love
the
this
number one
Mad
sports
Dog.
talk show. Yeah, because now that Mad Dog's like, you know, in a mix with First Take, I'll just use it. And like, I'm just a kid at that point going, like, that sounds insane, but I don't know. Like, it seems insane that Garnett thinks he's going to come out. When Kobe came out, people were like, a guard? A guard? Like, who? I didn't even like him, and I'd never even seen him play. I just, like, a guard thinks he's going to do this. But the point that I'm going to make here is that people that were protective of college hoops, like, every time somebody left and flamed out, what did everybody say? Oh, he should have stayed. Should have stayed, right? There's development arguments on it, but it's like, so you're telling me all the 4-year guys, it worked out? Like everybody's Keith Bogans?
Right.
Because he stuck around a bunch of years? Like it was really like a bullshit argument because you'd only be using like certain examples. And I remember like I went through it one year and looked at like all the freshmen that jumped and then the high school guys before them when we were still allowed to do it. It's like, should Jonathan Bender have gone to college or should he have gotten the rookie guaranteed money?
Right.
Like, of course, considering how he broke down, like, he didn't fail because he didn't play. He failed because his injuries. Like, he might have been really good. And the obsession with guys you'll never meet, athletes you'll never know, and like, oh, you failed. But no, you're mad that something that you care about was damaged because somebody who was really good for your product left early. And when it doesn't work out, you're going to blame the decision and not the fact that all sorts of guys with completely different paths to the NBA, you know, the turnover is ridiculous on the back end of the league. And it's the young guys, it's the vet guys. But nobody ever points that out.
It's a great point.
Thanks, dude.
Great point.
The development
Use that for a
point
clip.
is an interesting one because I
Put that in the thumbnail.
it sort of ties into what you're saying about J-Dub. If you're talking about development and ultimately trying to become the best version of yourself as a player, I still think getting to the NBA sooner is always going to be better.
And man, I'm so glad you said that because so many guys are like, look, what? Like, we're actually going. Your job is going to be basketball.
Right.
Like,
Right.
certainly there's an argument of like, hey, cool, I've been here 3 years. Like, I haven't gotten any minutes. But like, stay on this because I think only NBA people are the only people that ever say this, and nobody ever wants to believe that it's true.
It's NFL and college football bodies. Like, you see it almost instantly. We're like, this guy is now working out every day and has like the money to spend on his body. It's like you can see it.
Yeah, it's the resource of time is the biggest thing. I mean, you talk about waking up every single day and just simplifying it down to the only thing I have to worry about today is becoming the best version of myself as a basketball player. And especially now, even with NIL in college, not only are you dealing with social life, school, practice, but now you're also mixing in the business entity of a college athlete, which,
Right.
has its own pitfalls. And I mean, I think about having that additional ball to juggle as a college athlete, and something inevitably has to give there. And more often than not, some people, it's what they're going to sacrifice is their development. And when you talk about developing in a professional structure, part of it is based off the organization in which you end up. But for the most part, I mean, most organizations understand what it means to maximize a young player and what goes into that.
It's kind of like when guys who are like in the NFL or NBA are like, hey, let me do this podcasting thing. And you and I are like, we fucking wake up and we just, we live it every day.
But you
Just
want to
We
talk
get
about
better every day.
Grind.
You
I
want to
stay
talk
hungry
about,
every
like,
day.
desensitization. Remember when Josh Norman was going to announce he's going to be doing the Fox segment?
Yeah.
People are like, an active player is going to be doing stuff with the media.
Brandon
Yeah.
Marshall doing Inside the NFL. I
Right.
actually was pissed about that because he flew to New York every Tuesday.
Beautiful.
But
Hey, can I ask you about the development thing with the Heat? Because other teams talk about you guys.
Yeah.
And they admire what they've done with you. Kendrick Nunn comes the name.
Kanon's balling, by the way.
Balling
I don't
right
know
now.
if you've seen what he's doing in
Um,
EuroLeague. He's still
Strus.
Chicago's finest.
yeah, he was.
What do they do with you guys down there? Because it seems that they have a really good track record on the guys on the fringes. When I would say you're one of them.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry.
No, certainly a guy in the fringe.
Fringe guy.
Absolutely,
That
definitely.
was
fringe
hurtful.
Guy.
So you got
No,
the
Is it
contract.
Pat Riley
hurtful.
stealing people's cookies? Is that what it is?
No, I think the Heat, what they really excel at is they don't let people slip through the cracks, and they maximize every single day, no matter if you're in the rotation, out of the rotation. And I think a lot of times when you get this long season, 82 games, you get to January, February, and a lot of these guys that are, 10th, 11th, 12th guys or deeper in a rotation or a roster, they just sort of, it becomes like, are we really going to do this again today, over and over? And I don't want to like disparage any other place because I haven't been any other place, but all I can
Big off season.
yeah, all I can speak on is what the Heat do. And my first year is an amazing example. I mean, I played 15 games in the NBA, most of which were throwaway, blowouts one way or another. But every single day it was like, all right, how are we going to prepare Duncan for an opportunity, whether it comes this year, next year? We're talking about, in the weight room, on the court, and then also like helping me as a young player. I was 24 at the time, so really not that young. But conceptualize how I was going to be an impactful NBA player and what that actually looks like, because that's as big a part of it as anything. A lot of guys come in and they think that, all right, I'm going to get to rock out or do this or what I did in college at this level. And the reality is it just obviously doesn't work that way. So having an organization that helps you kind of lean into that self-awareness of this is how I'm going to be a good NBA player, I think is pivotal. I think it's really important.
Good answer.
I don't know if that speaks to.
No, it's a good answer.
I want drills because I want to work on some stuff.
Yeah. I want the diet.
We can talk catch and shoot at speed, working on some different stuff, some footwork stuff. We can get in the gym this summer.
I just need a Heat assistant to like leave the organization. I can hire him just to put me on a scale every day. Just like, buddy.
Is it really that militaristic?
No, I think some of it's like.
When was the last time you were on a scale?
Well, that was 2 days ago.
I can ask a direct question.
Good stuff.
The weight and body fat they're on top of. I mean, that's an every 2 weeks sort of thing. Making sure you're checking that box. It's just a standard, like they just have standards that they want to live by, and they're gonna make sure that you fall somewhere close to it. It's not what you're saying. It's not.
I don't know.
militaristic.
I'm not saying really anything.
He's just
other than-
curious.
Yeah, because I mean, look, I made fun of Heat culture for a long time because it's just be like if you were losing, be like, how come they're not using their Heat culture? Then you make that run to the finals, and I'm like, I no longer can ever make this joke because Gabe Vincent goes crazy.
Yeah.
Caleb Martin turns into fucking Scottie Pippen. And then, whatever, you run out of the juice against Denver, which was it was going to be a tough matchup for you. But I mean, after that, it's like, look, I think that there's so much. Miami's not for everybody. Like if you're neutral, there's no neutral with the Heat. You either love the whole deal or you hate it. But I think there has to be like some baseline level of respect for what it is that you guys do year in and year out of just exceeding expectations. And again, other people that are talent evaluators for their careers that work in this league without any prompting will compliment. But then you always wonder, like, is it this thing from the top down from Pat Riley where like Heat players have to take themselves and the job more seriously than 29 other franchises? Because that's how it's described sometimes.
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems from Coach Riley. I will say, and obviously I love the organization and I've benefited from it a lot. We've had some great runs and some great times. I will say when they started to sort of shift it into like a marketing thing, I think it lost a little bit.
It's like the rally monkey.
Well, just like it was
exactly like that.
At least for me as somebody, it was like when I got there, I didn't necessarily know about Heat culture, hear about it in that way. And it was this kind of like cool thing of like, all right, yeah. And then you get in there and like in between the walls and you see like it manifest in the day to day and you're like, all right, like, and you buy into this. And then, and I'm not like coming at missteps of the organization, but then when it, we had like the culture jerseys and on the court and, I understand. I think it just like ripened us up for people.
I got a Jovic.
Like,
I was going to say, I just love the visual of like, a larger man in the stands wearing with no undershirt. Heat culture.
The whiteout night one.
Drunk as fuck.
I just think it's really
I'm a
easy
Heat
for
culture.
people like you guys to just take shots at it. I'm not saying it was a bad marketing move.
That
I'm
made
just
it
saying
easier, but I've been on the record. I'm like, after 23, I can't make the joke
The
anymore.
consistency is real.
Who are
That's
the
the
other
thing.
teams in other sports that you would accuse of?
Well, I do think I'm working theory. I like if the Yankees don't go deep this year, like the mustache thing ruined them. Like you can't let them just start growing mustaches.
I see. Again, I'm with you on this.
Yeah.
It was the dumbest rule, and people would be like, try to act profound about it. I'm like, it's so dumb. I love it.
Yeah, right.
Because
It's
of
your
all the
Yankee.
facial hair options, they're like, we're staying with this 1980s fireman fucking thing. And you're just like, this is the only thing that you're allowed to do.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
It was great.
It is also just a way to stand out. It's just a very specific.
Well, it's just, it was kind of, not that George Steinbrenner is Pat Riley, but like the idea that George Steinbrenner had the arrogance to be like, there's 29 ball clubs and there's the Yankees. Like that's, that does affect probably how guys approach it. So yeah, I think they made a big mistake letting them grow beards.
Saying on the Yankees though, and you make this joke all the time, and it used to, like when I was capped in Massachusetts for a while, like I hated it so much, and it was like this guy earned his pinstripes this October.
Yeah, the pinstripes is so funny.
And you're
I
just
take
like,
him away.
This guy just hit 50 dingers for you during the regular season, but he had a 2-out knock to right field, and it's like,
Take a pinstripe off.
Like that guy earned his pinstripes. Like, what are you talking about? He's one of the 4 best players in fucking baseball.
Yeah.
I know, maybe it sounds like I'm talking about A-Rod, who got like put 8th in the batting order in the playoffs. So like his pinstripes, he was almost wearing like an all white Heat jersey in the playoffs at one point with his pinstripe loss at some point. But that is one of those things where it may mean a ton in the building, but you're right.
Yeah.
No one else is going to say, I love that.
Yeah. The pinstripes thing is so funny too, because like living in New York and having a bunch of coworkers or Yankees fans, like they know it's ridiculous, but if you ask them, you can get them into like a real argument about it, being like, Aaron Judge, pinstripes, and they're like, "Come on,
yeah."
But yeah, he hasn't shown up. Like it's like you just get them into
Say what
it.
you want about Brocious, but earned his stripes.
Yeah, Paul O'Neill, that guy had pinstripes for days. All right, I gotta go. Because I got mini golf tomorrow. Thank you guys.
Huge day at the office.
I'll just leave with this one. Can I leave with one question?
Yeah.
This is gonna
A
be
parting
beautiful.
question.
Here we go.
What really did happen with Jimmy Butler?
See you, Dan.
You don't want to stick around for the answer?
Is it surprising for you guys that the job security for NBA coaches feels more tenuous than NFL at this point? We're taping this the same day. Obviously, Mike Malone got fired in Denver. And we've had 3 coaches in the last 5 years who've won championships who've then lost their job.
Yeah, coach of the year used to be the real like kiss of death.
Yeah.
Because you went through it and it's like every coach of the year, like the last 10, they're gone within 2 or 3 years. It's a really good question because now teams, I think, knowing how much money they're making on the new TV deal, the cap is spiking nice year to year. So clearly, and look, that revenue is locked in for the most part. I mean, we talk about the year to year operational stuff, but that TV money, it does feel like teams like Detroit had to get rid of Monty because it was just, I think it's one of the worst coaching jobs. And the fact that they're this much better this year, granted they have more spacing and K took it up to another level, but they paid that guy so much money and they knew they couldn't come back with him and they just ate it. I don't know if that happens 10 years ago. They bring in Vogel and they're like, we're done. So I think the turnover, the eating the dead money on the coaches is like nothing we've ever seen before. And maybe it's just, hey, we know this isn't working now. We're not going to ride out another year and make all these players miserable. Again, I'm talking as an outsider, so I don't know what you would say to that, Duncan.
Yeah, I mean I think the Malone one and the Taylor Jenkins one were both uniquely surprising. The Malone one specifically, I mean, they had a run to defend their title last year, and then they're gearing up for another one. And he doesn't even get the chance to do it. Stuff will probably come out. I don't know what the inner turmoil was of that dynamic, and it maybe got to a point where it just wasn't going to work. I do think a big part of this is higher ups, front offices, or ownership looking at star players and looking at windows and looking at how do I maximize this time when this guy's on the roster, because now you see so much player movement with the best players. If you get a disgruntled player, you're looking at a media shitstorm. You got guys like Ryen going on his podcast saying all sorts of stuff. You got guys asking out, and then you're looking at a full rebuild, from
That'd
there.
be a great show. The Ask Out rankings justified. Rankings based on justification.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, well, Giannis, I could kind of see maybe after this year. Yeah. Or then you're like, Durant, before the 4-year extension kicks in.
Well, here's the question, and I think we've all sort of talked about this individually, and you guys, we all sort of see different sides of this. You have to see this in the locker room to a certain extent. We have to see it in shows, media, whatever it may be. There's so much whispering all the time. Then this, to me, feels like this is NBA specific more than other sports. And maybe it's the length of contracts. There's probably a bunch of different reasons for it. But there's so much whispering all the time about people being unhappy. And sometimes people are unhappy. It's true. But there's also like a team goes on a 2-game losing streak, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, they want out. And so it creeps into everybody's brain of like, okay, we need to fire Taylor Jenkins because Ja's going to ask out. Like, Ja didn't ask out. Maybe he would have.
Oh, you're totally right.
But it's a total hypothetical that is based off no factual thing that has happened. And so I wonder if like the way our cycle is now, it just creates a thing. I was thinking about with the culture conversation, because like one of the things with the Heat is like they got the same people running the show. So they'll trade Jimmy if it gets to that point, but like they are going to do what they have to do, and they're not going to be like swayed by, 7 people starting a sort of like narrative online, and then it becomes like a thing that crescendos.
Yeah, I think, the interesting one was the Grizzlies won it first. And when that happened, there was like this collective shock, at least internally. Like we were all looking at like, what just happened. And this kind of ties back into what I was saying about maximizing a window, is that if you have a coach and you don't think for whatever reason it's not working, especially now with how many great coaches are available in an off season, I don't really understand why Taylor Jenkins was fired, but I can sort of at least see the logic of, all right, this isn't going to work. Maybe we have somebody that we just brought in from Europe who we believe in, could be a great coach, and the guy Tomas who took over. Let's give him a trial run before just giving him the keys in the summer, because who knows how that goes. And then we end up, if that doesn't work, then we end up firing him a year later. So, I can at least wrap my mind around that from a logical standpoint, but it's just turned into a carousel at this point where now you're going to get teams firing coaches because of Mike Malone's available, because of Taylor Jenkins is available, arguably prematurely. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling thing where I don't know when this necessarily stops or slows down.
The Jenkins one is strange just because it's like, all right, you brought in this new system. When they blast out, like the thing we should all pay attention to is, oh, wait, all of Jenkins' assistants were blasted out. Then they brought in all these new people. And apparently, maybe we learned more about it after the fact, but like, it was like, hey, these are your assistants. And this is what the front office wants to run. And there was just a low priority of screens. You know, Ja being in the corner doesn't make any sense because he can't shoot. So if you have Ja and you're catering the franchise to Ja, as much as people would want to push back on the idea of doing that, that's what teams are doing when they think they have somebody special. And so I think ownership is very pro Ja there. And, you know, I don't think it's been a great Ja year based on availability. Like his high moments are still incredibly high. Like he can totally take over games. Like I was in love with that dude when he was younger and the trajectory that we thought he was on. And I'm not even getting into the off the court stuff or whatever, but like just watching the basketball part of it, they were still winning enough games, but they weren't beating anybody good. And that move from the offseason to blast out his staff and replace it with like an offense that they were like, you're going to run this because the assistants want it. Like that means they already thought he wasn't the guy.
Yeah.
And they were going to wait for that stretch where it's like, okay, once again, if you look through the top 6 teams at the time in the West, the last time I looked at it when it happened, they were like 11-18 against the 500 better teams. It was the worst record of those top. So they're probably going like, hey, we're not beating anybody good. And we installed an offense here. Like, that's what was so strange about it. It's like, we made you run this offense that maybe the head coach didn't even really want to run. It didn't seem like the star wanted to run. So now we'll get rid of the head coach. But now they're keeping, one of the assistants was also let go. And then this assistant ran a lot of the same system stuff, apparently, because Sam Decker was tweeting about it. It was like, well, if Ja didn't like Taylor's system, like, Tomas, this is kind of the system that he had used. So I have no idea if he's a good coach or not, but there's a lot of basketball stuff that gets ignored when the decision is made. And I think there are all these preemptive things that you'll hear about, like, hey, why do you do that with this guy? We never want to be able to say, like, down the road that we didn't cater to his every whim. And you just hope the guy that you're catering to is somebody that gets it enough that is going to give you what you need from the supposed face of your franchise. The problem is when you have some of these franchises catering to dudes, you're like, that guy's a third option on a really good team. But since he's your best option, now he thinks he's the man. And you're like, I think some of the stuff that happened with Westbrook and OKC, they were so happy that he stayed when Durant left that everything was catered to him. And then he's like, well, I get the ball every time. I'm putting up crazy numbers. I win an MVP. It's almost like, wow, the guy who stayed, like, it's so celebrated. And it's like, yeah, but what are you like? And I know his numbers are sick and people are going to tell me I'm wrong about it, but it's like, if he's your one, even in his prime, like, you're playing a very, very specific basketball that's never really worked in the playoffs.
Yeah. We're talking about these like tight windows and managing egos of star players and wants and needs. I do think there's a role that media has played in this, and just the current culture of fandom that has been cultivated plays in this as well. We were talking the other day internally as a team, and some of the older guys were talking about how you used to be able to go like stretches of bad games and just nobody would really say anything. And then now it's like you have like one bad game
clip,
and people are just
hater central
on
your
ass head about it. Like, whether it be the sports betting fans, whether it be like, you know, media, whatever it is, like, and it's such a highly opinionated dynamic where everyone's opinion is so readily available. And it is actually, what's crazy is people can say, well, it doesn't matter, it's media, talking heads, this, that, or whatever, but it's actually shifting narratives to the point where it's shifting decision making. And I think I do think stuff like this, like head coaches getting fired, is actually a symptom of this in and of itself.
I mean, it's hypothetical. I don't know if you talked about this other thing you taped today. If Denver doesn't lose that crazy game to Minnesota the other night where they smoke the layup and then foul at the end, and they don't go on this losing streak, is this guy the coach till June? Probably. But like the amount of shit they got after that game becomes
Yeah.
like, are they?
No,
are they,
you might be right. I mean, right, because it feels so immediate. Like I always joked about like baseball, and we'll stay on this, Tommy, because I think you're onto something. But like, I worked for my first team. First thing I did in sports, I worked for a AA baseball team, and I went from like super fan,
Trenton Thunder.
yeah, and I was like obsessed about everything Red Sox, and here it is, it's a AA Red Sox, and like they'd get swept by the Binghamton Mets or something, and the guys would be like out an hour after they showered, like across the street, young guys, minor league guys. And I'd be like, how come you guys like aren't home sulking? Like, what's, and they were like, are you serious? We have like 100, I don't know, double A, like 120 of these fucking things. We never have a day off. Like, see you tomorrow, like we can't be on the emotional swing that a fan would be. Again, I don't know how many super passionate Trenton Thunder fans were out there like every day checking the standings. But then once I got to Boston, and I'd be just talking about the Red Sox every single day on the radio show. And I used to, when I was younger, I would go into the locker room and I would see the media scrum because I just wanted to see it. We almost got thrown out because they were like, well, who are these kids in here? But we actually had media passes. We were allowed to see it. And the more I thought about it, it's like, okay, so the best player, the cleanup hitter, goes 0 for 4, 0 for 4 running scoring position, like has a shitty night, which is going to happen so many times over the course of a baseball season. And there's 10 reporters sticking a microphone in front of his face being like, hey, what was it about tonight? And he's going to sit there and be like, well, I just didn't see it great off the. And they're like, what does this mean about this team? And it's like, I don't fucking know. It may not mean anything. And it probably doesn't. And I thought like maybe baseball people should only have access like once a week. Or if somebody throws a no-hitter, like now you can talk to them. What could you possibly learn 162 nights knowing the randomness of baseball? And to your point of like, when something happens, it has to be something now, right? Because every night, like if you had this Saturday game on ABC or something and I was in the studio, then I'd really only be talking about like whether or not Duncan Robinson was good.
Yeah.
And if you were terrible, it'd be like, hey, could he even be in the rotation? You're like, dude, you just ignored Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. There is something to that. I think that every night there has to be a reaction because everyone is in content now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's actually one of my gripes with, sports media in general and media coverage and availability.
Like when you're out of the rotation,
yeah,
right? Like it seems like your career's over.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, well, rightfully so. Like as the individual, of course, and we're all competitive people, like we actually do feel that. But when you've been around a little bit, like you build a little more resolve to sort of like understand, all right, like this kind of comes and goes. And this is part of what, playing in this league is, because it's a brutally, competitive league. But you're right. I mean, there is always a reaction to everything all the time. And I don't know that reaction always needs to be covered or consumed. Like, I don't know, but it always is. I guess there's a positive to that, is that
people care this much. And that's why you guys make all the money you make. Of course,
right? That's a part of it. And like this sort of business side of the game, like the media coverage, we're all beneficiaries of it to a great extent. And it's part of why, I mean, especially you get to this point of the year and there's really only, 16 teams or so that are actually looking at the opportunity to play in the playoffs. The rest of the teams are engaged in this sort of other business of basketball. What does it look like with lottery odds? What is it? It's keeping everybody engaged in the product, which is an important piece. But there are pitfalls to it.
Can I make a counter to that a little bit? And I feel like you've talked about this in the show a bunch. We talked about it with those guys last week, so we've talked about it a little bit as well. And I don't mean to be like broadly dumping on faceless national media or whatever it is, but like the issue I would have with that point is I actually I take the Cleveland Cavaliers, for example. How many times do you think they've mentioned our boy Ty Jerome on First Take this year? I would venture to say 0. I'd venture to say that they clinched it 1 seed in the East today.
Yeah.
I'd venture to say that they have mentioned him 0 times. I would venture to say they've probably mentioned Jarrett 2 or 3 times. Mobley, because of the Player of the Year stuff, maybe a little bit more. They're a specific example of I actually don't think they lift the game up at all. And I'm not even calling that shows one example of this. But what I'm saying is I think that, and I was going to ask you guys about this in general. I think that a lot of these places, if they're not making themselves a story, which we saw 2 weeks ago, and is, it happens very frequently, are also like not actually getting into the weeds. There are a ton of great people at all of these outlets who individually are doing this, but I would say broadly, like everybody just needs to do better.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't even hold I'm not picking on First Take, but I don't hold the show like First Take accountable to that. I really don't. I view it almost as like a version of WWE. And I don't watch WWE, but I see it as like scripted television essentially, and it's more to be on in a doctor's office or whatever, a waiting room somewhere,
Equinox.
and just sort of intermittently engage with it. That's not to say that you can't enjoy it or whatever. If that's what you're looking for, like you said, there really are other better places that you can go and find. And that's the cool thing about this sort of democratized media, is that there are more opportunities for people to break out in these other spaces and actually talk about the game in a meaningful, insightful way.
I also don't know that the audience really wants all this intimate stuff that we think that they do. That's the biggest lesson that I've talked about a bunch of different times, is that, I talked about the Jokic angle probably more on the Malone firing than I did about breaking down their defensive lapses and why, a team that you're always a little worried about defensively. And I remember, just from like a basketball sense, it dawned on me. I was like, man, they're going to throw Christian Brown and SGA and Anthony Edwards like in a playoff series. Like, they're really limited. And, when I brought it up, it's like, oh, they got Peyton Watson. And it's like, yeah, but they can try that. But wow, they're really limited on the perimeter. And this might be a bad setup for them, depending on who they run into the playoffs. Or will Jokic ask out this summer? I can tell you, as somebody who's worked on air for a long time, the audience is going to prefer the Jokic topic.
Their numbers will
way more than if I did an open today on like, hey, Christian Brown, can he hold it for 38 minutes against two of the most dynamic perimeter guys in the league? So look, that's just a small example of it. But there was a thing recently too. It's like, the NBA discourse, again, a word I don't really love. It's just so negative. It's just so negative. And I'm like, yeah, but I think the people that are kind of in the top of the content game, like everybody raves about the TNT show. I mean, it doesn't matter who has a big game. I've learned to really like Shaq the guy. He's just going to shit on whoever it was. And Barkley takes great joy in not being able to name anybody on the team. And because they've been doing it so long, it's kind of just accepted and it's sort of fun. But, if it were so terrible, like, why does everybody say that that's the gold standard for any studio show in any sport? So I have, like, over the years come to this realization of, I love the nerdy stuff. If I were still working at ESPN, I was like, hey, why don't we give the NBA nerds what they want? And the people in TV would go, yeah, we tried that. It was called NFL Countdown, or Matchup. It was NFL Matchup. Merrill Hodge, Sal Palantonio was on it. Jaworski was on it. I used to love that show, and they canceled it.
Well, here's a
question. And 100,000 other people. Yeah.
I'm curious. You're
it was
the only
Matchup, not Countdown.
You're the only one of the people in this room who's worked for a long time at ESPN. Just as an example, they're not the only ones, but them as a hypothetical, just because you work there, and so that you just know how the sausage is made across the board. Now you're doing it.
I
obviously.
did then. I don't know, but yeah,
but in general, sure. and you know what works now. You know what's going to rate on your show.
No,
now.
I know.
Yeah. So I guess my thing is, if
that
you're gonna,
part I understand.
If you're going to compare the NBA versus the NFL specifically, because I feel like the NFL does a much better job of like not getting sucked into these distractions of, take for example, the Eagles this year. I'm like, when you're doing a pregame show, postgame show, whatever it is, and after like the NFC, like not even a playoff game, a regular season game, they're talking about Jalen Carter, like they're talking about AJ Brown, they're talking about the people that were involved in the game. I feel like the NBA, there's all these sideshows happening where they end up talking about things other than the actual product. And so that's where it just feels a little bit, maybe I'm being like, I'm exaggerating that a little bit, but I feel like, and I don't know if that's because it's fantasy. I don't know what the reason why it is better in the NFL, but it just feels like it is. It feels like their media is more on point in terms of how they're actually covering. You're always going to have the Travis and Taylor and the sort of like shit like that. Like that's going to happen. But in general, like that isn't happening as much as it does in the NBA, at least in my opinion.
I think you're right. And I think one of the positives, which is both a negative, is that the NBA is probably the biggest male soap opera available on television. You know, Yellowstone had a good run. You know, I noticed it too, like at ESPN, like all of a sudden I used to be out of there like, hey, July 4th. You know, that's when I'm taking my time off. They were telling you take your time off in July and August. And then I started like sticking around later in July because of all the stuff that had happened going all the way back to LeBron and the decision, you know? So it was like, I gotta be on the air for this stuff. Like this is, and we started like getting good numbers in July for talk radio, which was kind of like historically unheard of. But you started to realize like the off season and the turmoil was a lot of fun. Like the most we ever talked about baseball was like bonds and steroids. That was like the last huge baseball topic. So we are, as an audience, attracted to drama. Now, does that mean that the NFL doesn't need that they do a better job? I think we could probably get into like the stereotypes of like what a football player is versus what a basketball player is. Like football player, for the most part, is about sacrifice, right? When you have all the TV shows destroying the NBA culture right after the All-Star week, going like, this is what NBA dudes are all about. You're like, well, you're picking a really bad week to say that this is what they're all about. You know, people conveniently forget, like, you know, they stopped playing the Pro Bowl too, by the way, but the Pro Bowl was so late in the year. It's like, nobody's really even, you know, I think there's some of the criticisms that are kind of fair. Like, look, I love basketball more than any of the other sports. And I remember like anytime if like a guy from the UVM team would play pickup with us, he would not try hard on purpose because he didn't want to try hard. And if something like, say, one time somebody gets lucky and blocks a shot, then it's like, oh. So there's like a cool thing to basketball at times. But then it's like, yeah, but did you watch, you know, whether it's Minnesota or Denver the other night? Or like watch when you guys are good and grinding at the end of the year and how hard you're battling them. Like, hey, this team's in it again because everybody's so locked in. Look, people take their sides. They don't change their minds very often. But because there's so many games and there's so many nights in the NBA where you can find a night where it's just kind of ugly. It's the same thing with like the Jordan clips. Like we watch these other eras through clips of the greatest moments without realizing there was probably a horrible Golden State Sacramento game that happened on a Tuesday in 1992 that was dog shit and nobody's ever remembered, but yet they're comparing Jordan dunking on everybody in the Pistons to like a random turnover in a Nets season while they're tanking. So I think there's an origin place of like what a football player is, what a basketball player is, and some of the stuff I might even agree with, but it's held against the NBA in a way that at time feels unfair, but at the same time, like the league had a really weird stretch there for a bunch of months where it felt like, hey, if the league was quiet for 6 months without a guy being pissed off, it was surprising. And the NFL, the culture of the NFL, maybe at only the quarterback position is the only comparison you can come up with. Like, who's the guy that's not sacrificing for the team? I think that turns a lot of NBA or anti-NBA people off. They use that as their position.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I went kind of long on that. So
No. I think the fact that player movement can be so impactful in the NBA. One player moving to another team or you know, a team that just is a piece away acquiring a player. I think that also shifts just the attention and the focus of a fan base in an off season. And also when you're looking at, you know, you look at the draft this year, you know, there's a potential generational talent. So then you have, you know, whatever the bottom 6
Clayton
to 8.
Jr.
You have the bottom 6 to 8 teams.
Have you thought about just like getting in front of the Clayton Jr. thing to see if the Heat pull like another Shabazz Napier? Where they're like, hey, one of our guys love.
I don't think I'm moving the needle on
Duncan loves Clayton Jr., dude. We got to keep that guy happy.
I'm not moving the needle on draft decisions internally. But you have this whole other side of being a fan that's not just watching the 82. I mean, I don't know how many, and this also like ties into this bigger conversation around covering the league. there's a small percentage of fans that are actually tuning in and watching all these games. I think what fandom looks like nowadays is, you're checking in on box scores, you're watching clips, you're watching highlights, you're checking into the bigger games. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's, once every couple weeks. But for the most part, you're like emotionally attached to the group, and you want to see, if you're struggling, you want to see what this turnaround looks like. It's always like, what could we be? And what does that look like if we get the next piece or the young player? And I think that that's a really important thing for media to cultivate as well. And that's why you see, numbers in July going crazy of a sports radio show talking about, breaking down the draft. I mean, just the amount of content around draft and free agency alone that you see being pumped out, speaks to the demand and the want for that sort of material. I think it generally says, and everybody wants to talk about, the game is ruined and we shoot too many threes and all this stuff. I think it actually generally speaks to the health of the league as a whole and how much people are actually interested in it, because it doesn't mean that you have to be contending every year to be a fan of a team and still be excited, about the future.
Here's a question I have. I don't know if I've talked about this with Cam a lot. I don't know if we talked about that when you were in February, because I totally agree with you. But my question with fandom, specifically the NBA in certain markets, honestly, we just saw it with Dan talking about the Bulls, but this is definitely the case in Brooklyn. And he's even said stuff publicly about this, is like their fans want them to lose. And a lot of teams' fans, basically, it gets to like December 15th and they start being like, we want you to lose. And they start getting mad when they win. And so they're like, the Bulls fans are like fucking Big Cat sulking because Modest is playing well. And he's like, why are they winning in March? Like, we need to be losing. And I think your perspective, would just be, you haven't really been in that situation because you've been on good teams. But the perspective of like, I'm just trying to be a professional and I'm just trying to like, besides the fact that I'm trying to be professional for my own,
right,
supporting my family and, my well-being, I'm also trying to be professional in terms of like, they're paying me now. I want to play well. And you actually have, fans who are upset when you score 25 points and you guys happen to like upset the Timberwolves.
That's wild. Yeah.
That's its own issue that I think is sort of special and unique to the NBA. I mean, I guess you see tanking in football, but even, wasn't there
not like this? I mean, but that's also the thing that I think is always super unfair when people like throw the NFL rating at the NBA people, and you're like, look, supply, the rarity of the product, it's on network, it's lined up perfectly on a Sunday. Like, I just want to be like, you don't think NBA ratings would be better if they played 18 games and they were just on Sundays? Yeah. Like, give me a fucking break. I know what the most popular sport is. I know that at ESPN, they'd rather us do a C-level NFL segment than an A-level basketball segment. But there's stuff that's happened in the last few years. And I think a lot of it's very like politically driven, where if you're on the far right, you're looking at any NBA number you can find that tells a declining story. And we saw that with like the first quarter, and the first quarter was coming off of, there's a bunch of they'll sound like excuses, but I just don't know that you can look at the two products and compare them in a way where it's like, what's the goal? Like, if the NBA is not beating the NFL ratings, then there's a bunch of losers. Like, I have a hard time believing this many networks got into the live rights game and that they're all of them are stupid. That every single one of these companies were like, let's do something really dumb and pay these guys this much every single year. But I got in the way of kind of where you were going with that.
Well, I just think in general, the losing stuff, when you're talking about teams like holding guys out or trying to lose, I do think it messes with, and I don't want to sound like old school, but like the competitive, like sort of integrity of the product. At the end of the day, like, and obviously I haven't been in that situation, but I've played against those teams. Those guys are out there competing and trying to win. And like we played the Sixers last night, and they've now lost 12 in a row. But all those guys out there are essentially auditioning to continue to be NBA pros. And obviously some of them are going to have long careers, but this is also like a tricky time of the year when
it's such a weird time of the year. Like this part of the product is not.
Yeah.
This is not the time of the year where you're like, the league's never been better. Like I think the league's deeper than ever before, but we've always known this.
But
that late March, April stretch is weird.
I'm sure you've talked about this a million times, so I feel like apologetic. I don't know your stance on this. Do you feel like there is an actual is there a way, like if they flattened out the lottery odds, is there a way to fix this a little bit where you don't have teams deciding on, there are certain teams, we don't have to like name them specifically, but we can, who decided a week after Thanksgiving, they're like, this year is toast. We are out. We are out.
Washington was that bad. Utah definitely.
New Orleans had the injuries. They were like that. Utah right. Basically decided. All these Western. Ironically, I would say Portland probably thought that, and then Portland
had a little a nice stretch.
Yeah,
where I think they were kind of maybe like, look, can we play in the playing game? I mean, that becomes another.
But how is that good? Like the thing with the NFL, I this is very anecdotal, but I went to a Chiefs Browns game in mid-December this past year in Cleveland. Browns stunk. Obviously, the Chiefs were very good. Browns are playing for nothing. Right. They had been eliminated, 3 or 4 weeks ago. Place is packed. Tailgate's packed. Teams playing their ass off. Obviously, football is different. If you don't play hard, playing in the NFL, you're going to get killed. So you have to play hard. But it just felt like a game they wanted to win. It felt like everyone on the Cleveland side of things was like invested in winning this game. This to me feels like it's like an existential issue for the league. If you're going to have 6 to 10 teams who basically are deciding in December that we're out.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it used to be worse. I think you started the season going, all right, there's already 10 teams that want nothing to do with this. They have flattened out the lottery odds. There's certainly math available where they could flatten out even more, but like it used to be just straight up,
yeah.
Like everyone gets an equal chance. So every time that you think you're fixing the incentive to tank, there's just going to be a different version of the math that everybody else is going to think is wrong. Like if there's anything I really learned about all this stuff is that we love fixing stuff. Like even when we try to fix something and then it's fixed
they find another way.
Like the pursuit of this perfection. It's like, how about we just accept? It's like officiating. It's like, man, these guys need to be better. Like, have you watched college games? Yeah. Right. So I don't want to lose my train of thought here, but I think there have been teams, because even if like a team isn't good, but they've been tanking for a few years, then you can tell like ownership, probably people in marketing being like, hey, like, can we at least go into the year with some kind of hope? Like, I don't even think Detroit was trying to tank last year. I think they thought they had like a better chance at it. And they were there's no way they should have a worse record than Washington should have. But I think the most important thing to understand is that it is the hardest professional league to be a GM in. Okay. Baseball, there's no cap. You can have some randomness in baseball that usually gets flattened out over 162, but football, you can hire the right coach. They have a salary cap, but it's sort of like a fake salary cap, but even like less restrictive than the fake salary cap that the NBA has. The contracts aren't guaranteed. So you can get really creative with your financial like freedom. Like you can find ways in the NFL. If you want to do something, you usually can do it. The NBA, you can't really do it. Like once you're over the cap and then you're into the tax, and granted it can be on the owner, but like the new apron stuff is basically a hard cap beyond the soft cap. So you save up for your cap space, and now players aren't even waiting to become free agents. They're taking the extension, and then they have no qualms whatsoever asking for a trade before the extension has even started, which happened with Durant and happened with Dame. So now you're saving cap space for who? Because now guys are just signing. So like the whole, hey, look at this free agent class, it's going to be loaded in 2027. It's an awful gamble to make.
Yeah, they're going to be gone.
Trades are more restrictive than ever. Like, I don't understand why you can't just say, hey, I've got a top 10 pick. Like, I want to trade it for that really good player. And I don't care if the salaries don't match. There could be some accounting I think could make up for that later on. So saving your cap space in a bad free agent year doesn't work. So then you have to overspend on somebody, just hoping somebody takes your fucking money. You can't do the trade part of it. A coach doesn't really change. You're not going to be a 38-win team and then win 52 games because of the coach. You have to have 2 of the best 20 players, or you don't really have a chance of winning a title. So the reason I bring up all that stuff is that if you're interviewing for a GM job and you're being honest, you're telling ownership, like, these are all the things we probably shouldn't do. So we tear it down, not even to the studs, and we try to stockpile whatever assets we can, and we take 3 shots of the lottery and hope it works out. It's not pretty, but it's really the only way you can do it with so many of these franchises. So that's why it happens. And I think the I don't know if there's a way to lessen all of the other restrictions to make the draft picks less important. But right now, draft picks are really the only way to try to change who you are. And of course, that's no guarantee.
Well, yeah, I think the other piece of it is we've seen it work, and we've seen teams lose and be in this place where it's like, oh, what's their direction forward? And then all of a sudden you get a piece, and you get a generational player, or you get a handful of young players, and OKC. I mean, they went from being young and not having any direction, and now they're young, fun, and the most connected team in the NBA.
But wouldn't you argue? I mean, with OKC, it's like you're like, it hasn't even started yet. With OKC, they're like this because they made the greatest trade of all time, where they get Shea and 19 picks for PG. J-Dub, not a product of tanking.
By the way, they have like unprotected Denver picks at the end of this decade. They've got a Dallas one. I mean, it's just Philly, every time there's a trade or something
they're just
tumultuous happens, you're like, wait, what could, do you realize they've got that one there? By the way, OKC, it's not like they were just terrible for a bunch of years. They made the playoffs for CP that year.
Yeah, like
they
Chet,
had like 2 down years.
Yeah.
Chet was the only one. He's the only one of all those guys who's a top 5 pick, right? It's like these are product of bad trades. Boston got those guys because of the horrible Nets trade. Like that wasn't; those weren't their picks. That wasn't them tanking.
No. Yeah.
So it's like you actually look at this. I would say the team that probably the really good team, maybe they're not going to win a championship, that's playing right now, that's probably been the best product, is probably Houston. Maybe just because they've. But even then, it's like Şengün wasn't a top 5 pick. So you just go through all the best, all the all-stars, and yeah, there's a certain percentage of them that are top 5 picks, but there's also, it's just such a crapshoot. It's like most of them are first round picks, but they're not in the top 5.
You'd be shocked, dude. I'm telling you right now, if you go through like 10 years of the lottery, you'd be shocked. It's almost like half of the guys don't even make it to the 4th year of the rookie scale. Now, granted, it's a little different now because it used to be 4 years guaranteed, and then it was 3 in the team. And now it's like, sometimes teams will just pick up that 3rd-year option just to not admit how bad they did with the pick. But if you go through how often those picks are on a new team their 3rd year, so then you can make the argument like, hey, well, the lottery, it's like, well, look, I gotta come up with something.
Yeah.
I mean, you can even say this about Miami. I mean, I don't want to put you in a tough spot here, but it's always like this lurking thing because of what happened with 15 years ago with LeBron and Wade and Bosh teaming up with Wade. And it's like, oh, well, they're clearing cap space. And then they're going to go do this. And then they're going to get this guy. And it's like, it's been what, 10 years and it's Jimmy Butler. So even with all the advantages that Miami has across the league, you compare that's the other thing too. It's like, oh yeah, we saved up our cap space. Oh, you did? Utah? You got 40 million? You guys got 40 million in cap space? That's going to be fucking awesome for you guys. Like, what are you going to do with it? Football, a little different. There's some cap space, but like, all right, I don't have to really live there. I'm going to play football for 4 months. It's a 9-to-5 job, 8 or 9 road trips. And I'll be back home in January. It's a different kind of job, man.
Yeah. I still think, and I do think tanking wouldn't be as much of an outcome for teams if there weren't examples of it working. And I think you get, at the very least, as a bad team, getting young building blocks, young players in their first contract is the most valuable thing you can have in the NBA. And then from there, it's, you can trade, you can, create some roster flexibility from there. But, people make the argument the worst thing you can be in today's NBA is just mediocre and in no man's land. You'd rather be one or the other. You'd rather be competing. Obviously, that's what everyone wants to do. But if you're not that, then, you want to be in a situation where you're at least collecting young players and draft capital.
That's the Chicago point that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Like, all right, cool. Like, in a weird way, I almost respected the Vooch trade because it was, all right, you're just trying to be better. Because then we become obsessed, I think, in the media side of things and the fan side of things. I'll never forget, like, the Celtics had made some trade. I think I ended up with Bob Ryan somehow, right? and somebody else was like, is this a championship move? And the Celtics just weren't that good. And Bob Ryan's like, what the fuck are you talking about? He's like, they're just trying to get better. What the hell's wrong with getting better? The guy they traded for is better than the guys they traded out.
Yeah.
Like what championship moves did they turn down to execute this one? Like what are you talking about? So the Vooch trade is a disaster. It's so bad when you think about like what actually, I mean, Franz should be running around in Chicago.
Yeah.
You fit right in here.
I don't disagree with you. I feel like sometimes I turn into like a process hater, which I don't really know why, but I think my thing with the process, sort of my best way to crystallize my issue with it, besides sort of all the blown picks, was they traded Drew to start the process. And you're telling me you wouldn't, Drew Holiday in Philly, if you hit on one or two of those picks, is not going to make your team better. It's like you cut off your nose.
You're totally right about this.
You cut off your nose to spite your face, and it just gets back to the culture thing of like, you need culture setters. Houston is not Houston without Van Vliet and Brooks and all those guys, like straight up, like, and these teams try to shortcut it with these top 5 picks, and then the talent might be there, but they still don't have it. And then you wonder why OKC is OKC, because they have the culture. It's not just the picks.
Yeah, I do think playing meaningless basketball and developing in meaningless basketball is a dangerous game, because you start to get, you see young players with bad habits, and at some point it's got to look like it's translating to winning at the end of the day. And talent can be one thing, but you want players that are impacting the bottom line of trying to win. But yeah, I mean, that it can be hard to cultivate that in a setting like that. So I'm not like a proponent of it. Like I think teams should be tanking. I just get why they do.
Do you have maybe don't mention the East because you're going to be in the East playoffs. Do you have a West team or player that you anticipate maybe overachieving?
I think the Warriors have a chance to be pretty dynamic in a playoff series. I mean, I've seen it too many times with Jimmy in a playoff setting. I don't know what that totally looks like next to Steph, but Steph is incredible. So
it's a lot of smart basketball
players.
I
mean that's one thing that
I think Jimmy text you say, hey, and I saw you guys are hot.
Yeah.
You guys are doing pretty good.
Yeah,
What's
we
going
have a weekly FaceTime session that we just kind of dial in once a week.
It's safe to assume he wouldn't have texted you once after he was traded, right?
We have not exchanged anything post trade, but Jimmy and I are
yeah. I don't mean that because of animosity, but
yeah. No, I just think
I made a mistake. Miss you, dude.
we were talking a little bit back and forth when he was away from the team and some stuff here and there, but I think when he was gone, he was ready to be gone, obviously. So
I have a closing question for you about we asked Dan this. JJ and I asked Dan this when he came in our office before JJ took the job. I'm curious, we didn't even get into all of your background. We got into some of the Trenton Thunder stuff. I think that everyone who knows your show knows you're not exactly a closed book when it comes to your background.
Yeah, no, I talk about this stuff.
But I'm curious your advice for and I know you do the advice segment on the show, but if you're a kid who's trying to hustle and make it in 2025 media.
Yeah.
What is your thing? Because you've done every single job in the business before getting to this place, and people probably still underestimate that. What is the thing they do now from a scrap standpoint that you think is the thing you were most effective at?
Well, I mean, look, you start getting older, you're on the air long enough. I have a habit of telling some stories over and over again, but I've talked about this before, but when I wanted to get on the air, even though I really wanted to work for a team, I didn't want to be on the air desperately. Even when I was on the air, I'd be showing up to these hoop camps being oh, is there it's just so embarrassing, but whatever. When you're delusional, you can also be powerful. So start there. Delusion can be a power when you're younger. Cause you just ask for stuff. You're like, oh, I wasn't supposed to ask for that. I guess I'm learning the lesson. And then somebody might say yes one day. But when I wanted to get on the air, as I was trying all these different things, it felt impossible. Somebody was going to say to you, hey, you get to be on the air for money and we're picking you to do it, despite the fact that you've never, ever done it before. And the only reason I got on is because the place in minor league baseball that I came down for an interview, like the interview went really badly because I was like, I can't believe I'm like about to be 27 and you guys are offering me this unpaid internship. Like, you called me up for a job. I sent in a resume and like, what's the job? And again, that was me being like, is there any front office stuff to do? I mean, it's insanely stupid. Like, what were you doing bartending the last couple of years? Yeah. All right. Well, we'll send you down to the Sally League and why don't you dial up some reports and you come back up here and you'll work with a hitting coach and talk about adjustments just because you watch the Red Sox a lot, you fucking dork. So as I was sitting in the interview, being like, well, this is a waste of time. Like, I said it. I was like, I was just kind of like, I can't believe I flew down here for this. Like, I don't even have that much money and just I spent a plane ticket and a hotel. I'm like, I think I'm out of here. And they were like, whoa. They kind of like liked it, but I was like, this guy might have something to him. So then another guy came over and was like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to work for a team. He's like, I saw that you did some like stuff with a local CBS station. And I was like, yeah, sort of. I was like, I was an intern. Like, the most they ever let me do was write the script into the teleprompter. I edited highlights and stuff.
Important responsibility.
Yeah. You know, back then, betas, you don't want to fuck that stuff up. Wasn't digital. So he was like, do you want to maybe call the middle innings? And I'm like, what? And he's like, do sales for us in the off season. And then during the season, we'll sort of figure it out. But then you can call innings 4, 5, and 6 because the other announcer, his contract's up at the end of the year.
He's
and
just
like
a part-timer. He doesn't do the middle innings?
No, he did the middle innings. I'd be second guy in the booth.
Got it.
So in that moment, I'm like, all right, well, I did have some interest in like getting into sports media. Like, I wanted to work in sports. But at that point, I'd like almost given up on that part of it. And I'm like, it's so hard to get on the air. I have to just say yes to this. And my father thought I was lying when I told him, and I accepted it. It ended up being a disaster. I sucked. They're like, you're not very good. And I was like, I told you I'd never been on the air when you said, do you want to do this? Because I was like, why would you guys do that? They're like, you have a deep voice. Nobody listens. So I was like, all right. And I wasn't very good. And then they were like, we're going to take you off. And I was like, I'll fucking see you out of here. I'm out of here. I'm out of here. Anyway, the reason I tell that, once again, meandering story, is that the line to getting on the air back then was incredibly long, but it was thin. The line today is much shorter to get on the air, but it's very wide because everybody can be on the air tomorrow. So you have to look at that as an opportunity. There are not even close to as many hurdles standing in your way. If you're determined to be on the air, you go get a laptop and a mic and you're fucking live in an hour. All right.
Yeah.
That is like incomprehensible to me that something like that in life would one day exist when you're sitting there chasing down these classified ads of like, what is this or whatever. I was filling out the application at one point during my, I would say, down years. I was filling out the application in Newhouse at Syracuse. I'm not even sure I would have gotten in. But if you are determined to be on the air, you can be on the air. That's awesome, right? The other thing is everybody thinks they can do it. You know, I do these live shows. There's 1,000 people getting ready to cheer me on. I come out of the curtain. My buddy asked me, he's like, is your ego through the fucking roof when you walk out on that stage? And I go, no. The last thought that goes through my head is, of all the things to be like introduced to come out to a stage to do, this is so far and away the least fucking cool of any of the possibilities.
Live podcast.
Yeah, a live podcast. Like, so, you know, you watch enough of us do this, you're like, I could do that. And the thing is like
the tank top.
maybe you could do that. But you're going to actually have to do it, right? Like people who want to be a writer, it's like, oh, you're going to bang out a screenplay? Like, have you been writing at all? No. Like, so, you know, which this script book that I read by Robert McKee called Story, he's like, would you ever pick up a guitar and be pissed you couldn't play a song by the end of the day? So granted, talking into a microphone is not the same as playing a song on a guitar, but you'd have to get the reps. You'd have to figure this stuff out. And if you really care about it, you'll keep doing it. It's kind of like any fad that you get into. You're like, oh, I remember when I got that like ab machine and I used it for like a couple of weeks. Like if you care about developing the skill, you actually have to develop that skill. But now you can actually do it. And the craziest thing is you can get in touch with everybody now. If you really want to, you can find a way and you just start spamming away at everybody. I mean, people send in email stuff to Life Advice, like asking for a job. It's like, I got to worry about my contract this summer. Like, I don't even know.
I'm
like,
handing them out over here.
Yeah, right. Like, I'm not even charging any of that stuff. But what I'm saying is the point is that if you want to find somebody at a local news station, if you want to go to, like, I told somebody once, I was like, okay, so what are you passionate about? And they're like, oh, I love this football. I was like, well, look if that college football program has any local podcast. And it was like, oh, there isn't really anything. It's like, okay, so that might be your thing. So go in, find a market that you don't feel like is being served enough. And if you're really young, you're not even that threatening. So then you hit up the SID and say, I want to do all Cincinnati basketball stuff. Is there any way? And you'll be shocked. Like, there might be a guy in there that's like, hey, this kid just graduated. He's obsessed with Cincinnati men's basketball and he wants to do a podcast. Like, let's give him a credential, and now you're around it. The headway that you can make in such a short amount of time, it's all there for you. And it blows my mind. Maybe it's you grow up younger and it's like you take it for granted, all this access and all this possibilities that you have, that you don't understand how special this is. And that there's a I don't want to get into like a generational laziness debate, but like, if you decide you want to do some of this shit, you can actually just do it now. Where when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, it felt like, what's the point of even opening the door? Like, I don't even know, like, there's nothing. Like, how I wrote letters and mailed them to everybody.
Does the fact that you had to go over the hurdles that you did, I mean,
back to Jalen Williams here.
but yeah, doesn't that in a way sort of like legitimize your journey? And that if it had just been like, oh, I could just go get a laptop, fire something up, like, then you get just this crowded space where like people are like, it's
one
really foot
crowded.
in, 1 foot out.
Right.
Like,
No, it's super crowded. But like, I really do believe this. Like, if you decide to do something, if you decide that you're going to do it, I mean, within reason, like I wasn't tall enough to do what you do. And I wasn't good enough. So let's not get ourselves, because plenty of guys.
Podcaster in college. This is why
yeah,
he's always been good at it. You alwa's Duncan's.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Like, within the physical limitations of like, well, like, if we're not picking ridiculous things that you want to do. If you're listening to this right now, I really, like, man, I just think all of these barriers that were up for previous generations that want to get into media, like, yeah, you're going to be competing with way more people because it's just as easy as it was. It is as easy for them as it is for you now getting into this stuff. But like, I think life is a lot like youth soccer and little league baseball. Like, every kid from your town was probably 7 and played on the yellow team. And then like a few guys played in junior high. And then there was the high school guys that were like, man, he's still playing baseball. Like, he's into it. He's really good. He's still good enough to do it. I think our careers are the exact same way. Like, the cool shit, it's like a lot of people want to do it, but then they're like, this is kind of a pain in the ass. The checks suck.
I was going to say the other thing, and I don't want to cut you off, but the other thing, not to gas him up too much with him sitting here, but
Thanks.
This is the case with you. It's the case with Dan. It's the case with Bill. It's the case with the people who are, very successful, been very successful in this field for a really long time, which I always find amazing. We were kind of talking about at dinner, is like, it doesn't matter like how rich he gets. He's still fucking grinding. He's still doing the pod at 11 a.m. on Monday. Like it is, the routine is always there, almost like a player, where it is like, this is a thing that you like, from the outside looking in, you don't take it for granted. Like, you are like, you still will bust your ass on the show the same amount that you did when you were like pre-Van Pelt, pre-ESPN radio. And I feel like all those guys are all the same, where like the second it feels like you're starting to phone it in, the audience will know, and it'll be over. And it'll be like, you had a good run.
I'd be embarrassed to be on the air if I wasn't ready. I just would. I'd be embarrassed. And I think there's other people that are like, that's the game. Figure out a way to be on the air without having to do any of the shit.
Well, I think the other piece of it is you're also really good at it. And I think that, do you feel that way? Oh, you just got to make a decision and go after it, and it'll, you can get there. Because that's just been your experience, because you're really good at it. And I'm not taking any, and I agree with everything Tommy's saying. Obviously, like, you're checking all your boxes, and I know you work your ass off, but you're also, you have an ability to banter really and a back and forth, and I mean the story recall, everything. Like, you're just good at it.
You just busted out of monologue.
Yeah,
we're trying to end the pod.
I know. I was like, I gotta go home. What am I doing right now? But I honestly, as I'm doing that, I'm like, all right, how many people have heard this story? How many people have heard this story?
How much
There's
has that shifted your own experience? Like, I think about that in myself sometimes too, where it's like, there's a part of me that thinks I live in this like fantasy land of like I was always going to play in the NBA because I had a dream and I went after it, where it's like, dude, that was so far from like a foregone conclusion. But I obviously, like, I had to check all my boxes, but I also am 6'7", 6'8", and I have like an ability to shoot that. Yes, I worked at it, but there's also like some level of whatever you want to call it, given ability to that too. So like to sit here and say like,
right.
oh, you know, if somebody pops up the Cincinnati basketball podcast tomorrow and grinds at it for the next 10 years, that they're going to somehow work.
Well, I'd say if they want to become national, they'll have to pivot at some point career-wise. No offense to the Bearcats, but yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to deny that there had to have been like a couple natural things in there to get to a certain level. But I'll never forget, like, when I first tried out at ESPN and I wasn't really good, they were like, have you ever been solo? And I think solo radio is the hardest thing to do in any of this stuff. It's so hard. And I don't even know that I got as good at it as I would have liked to have been at it. Look, some people at ESPN thought I sucked at it. So there you go. I remember after the tryout, they were like, we'll call you Monday, because it was a weekend show because there's nobody around. That was the only reason they gave me the tryout. I was actually like filling the shift. And they didn't call Monday. And I called Wednesday. I'm like, hey man, just checking in. It's Ryen, you know, like, just love to get some feedback. And then it was like 3 weeks went by. My dad was like, hey, probably not ready yet. It's ESPN, you know. I think I was I was 30. So I was like happy that I was 30 because I felt like because they were like, how old are you? And if I had said like 29, I thought they would, like, back then they would have gone, no way. Nobody wants to hear any perspective from a person in their 20s. And then they call me back and they're like, hey, can you come in tonight, Saturday? And I was like, oh, tryout, like, I get it. It went well. And it was like, you know, we're actually just kind of like burning on the schedule right now, man. And then I realized, I was like, oh, there's just a mess. They're so unorganized in the schedule. So they were calling me constantly to fill in, and I was capable enough to be able to do it. And so I was still living in Boston. I was driving back and forth. And this gets back to my little league baseball, youth soccer thing, and just life sort of weeding us out. And really, I believe it has more to do with what you're willing to do. Like, it ultimately becomes a decision about yourself, not these outside. Like, some people have great luck, some people have bad luck, sure. But I met a guy who I'd worked with at like local radio, and he was like, I could just see the pain on his face. He wasn't happy for me. He was pissed. If he had heard like, oh, he got fired 3 years later, like, that guy would have been happy that I had been fired, because I represented something that he wanted and that at that point he didn't have. And he was like, so how's that work? I'm like, well, what are you asking? He's like, how does it work with ESPN? I was like, look, it's kind of crazy, but like, I'm on call. I go to New York Sports Club, Watertown, Mass, pick up hoops 3 days a week. That was my day. I'd sleep until 11, go right there, think I was going to lift. I'd be like, oh shit, that kid from CU Boulder's here. I'm like, all right. And that's all I gave a fuck about, man. I fucking loved it. I was like, I'm now the best I've ever been at basketball at 30 years old. That's crazy. Late bloomer. Should have stayed in school. So I told him, I'm like, I drive from Boston to Bristol. And he's like, and then what do you do? I was like, then I drive home. Like, what time's the shift over? I'm like, it's 1. Sometimes I get home at like post whatever. I'll get home at 4. And then I play Madden until 5. Then I sleep till noon. And he's like, and then what happens? I'm like, sometimes then I'll go play hoops. And then I'll come back to my car, because you weren't walking around with cell phones back then. And I'd be like, missed call 860. And they'd be like, hey, can you come in at 4? I'm like, fuck yeah. Shower, throw on a shirt, and I would drive back to Bristol. And that was my life for like a bunch of years, because I didn't move down there, right? And you know what the guy said to me? He was like, ugh. Because now he was happy to hear how much it kind of sucked. Even though it was ESPN, his face changed, because he was like, oh, that's fucking terrible, right? That's what his face was saying. And he said to me, he's like, I would never want to do that. And I was like, yeah. And that's my point.
That's what it takes. Yeah.
Good way to close it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, appreciate you taking some time, man. That was great.
Love catching up.
Tommy, thanks for making it happen.